We live in a world with an abundance of pain, suffering, and hardship, and it's only natural to wonder why. Why do you think that this is the case? Why has it always been so in human history? Maybe that's an impossible question. Perhaps instead I should ask, what purpose does that serve? How could it possibly help us? Alternately, why do you think that so much art often comes from a time or place filled with hard times, sadness, or loss? In music, there's a deep well of songs drawing from a full spectrum of darkness, whether they be about history or society, loved ones, or about ourselves. From breakup records to Woody Guthrie's guitar with "This Machine Kills Fascists" written on it, there's almost no end to songs you could point to here. With Steve Earle, you find a person whose life story is punctuated by heartbreak, loss, and pain, and while some of that is self-inflicted, who among us can say that we never made any mistakes? Do you have no regrets? If so, I certainly want to hear your story. Most recently, Steve Earle lost his friend and colleague Jeremy Tepper, who was the programmer for the Outlaw Country channel on satellite radio, which features Steve's show Hardcore Troubadour Radio. Another close friend and colleague was his longtime bass player Kelly Looney, who passed away in 2019. And of course, there's the monumental loss of his son, Justin Townes Earle, in 2020. All of this is enough to derail practically anyone's life, enough to stifle any hope for a happy future. But Steve Earle shows the irony of what pain, suffering, and hardship can spur by writing and playing music which transforms it into a kind of poetic triumph. This is key to understanding some of what is foundational to his art, but as dramatic as all that sounds, it syncs up with the highly charismatic, often acerbic, and at times mercurial figure that Steve Earle has personified since he burst onto the charts in 1986 with his debut album, Guitar Town. Along with the lows, there have been and continue to be dramatic highs in his life, especially creatively. I spoke with Steve Earle by video call in June 2024, a conversation which took place after losing Jeremy Tepper just 2 days before, a conversation where he talks about his rigorous summer tour, his relationship with his music before he became sober, his favorite cover songs from both artists covering his music and vice versa, aspirations to record Irish music and perhaps even a jazz record, and memories of growing up in the midst of musical greats like Doug Sahm. All that and more, including his love of North Carolina trout fishing, as well as more music from Steve Earle's latest album, Alone Again Live. I'm your host, Joe Kendrick, welcoming you to our episode on Steve Earle on Southern Songs and Stories.
I guess you best leave me alone, at least until this blues are gone. Guess you best leave me alone. Cocaine, can I kill my pain? Cocaine, can I kill my pain? Cocaine, can I kill my pain? Like a freight train through my vein. Cocaine, can I kill my pain?
Southern Songs and Stories is a proud part of the lineup at both Public Radio WNCW and Osiris Media, the leading storyteller in music. Follow Southern Songs and Stories wherever you follow podcasts, with more at southernsongsandstories.com. You can engage with us on social media. Southern Songs and Stories is on Facebook at Southern Songs and Stories, on Instagram at South Stories, and my YouTube channel is Joe Kendrick NC. I spoke with Steve Earle shortly before seeing him live on his Alone Again tour in summer 2024, and after acknowledging the death of his friend and colleague Jeremy Tepper, we begin here with my question about how his tour was going, which by my count booked 69 dates between June and September. Here is Steve Earle.
Great so far. The shows have been really good. I'm pretty proud of them. This is the continuation of last summer's tour, basically. I can't play everywhere I play in 30, I mean, in 90 days. So this is more like 100. We had a couple extra weeks because I I discontinued Camp Copperhead, the songwriting camp that I did this year. So we went ahead, and since we had it blocked out for childcare and everything, and for John Henry, my son's schedule, we went ahead and stayed out on the road that extra week that I would have been at camp. So um, it's a solo tour. It's actually harder work than touring with a band for me. It's just for some reason physically harder. A lot of it's just a lot of fingerstyle guitar, and I'm old, and you get aches and pains as a guitar player as you get older, we've learned ways to deal with that, and it's like just everything from the way we set the guitars up to all that changes over the year as you get older. I mean, um, and I we're not repeating that many markets. The markets that we are repeating, we went to Europe, which took 30 days away from us last year for North America. So we only played one Canadian date. We're going to go all the way across Canada from St. John's, Newfoundland, all the way to Vancouver. And that's coming up in it's actually 3 different trips across the border to accomplish that, with dates in the upper, tier states and the states in between. So we didn't have the Southeast at all last time. So we started in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And, the cool thing about touring solo is I don't have 10 or 11, like salaries out here, running on the clock, running on that all the time. So I get to fish a little bit more. I fish with a fly rod. So, I've always taken a day here and there. Usually I could fish maybe 2 or 3 days over the summer. I'm fishing more like 6 this summer. I already caught my first tarpon in Key West the other day. So I just started the saltwater thing with a fly rod just a few years ago, but, I'm fishing a couple of days, well, about 4 days in Idaho, 1 in Wyoming, and 1 in Colorado, and 1 in Montana. So
We could probably turn you on to some trout fishing up your way if you have a day.
and I've never done it, but I'm very much aware of it. It's because what you've got there, one of the last native brook trout fisheries, in your area, and I am going to get there and try that at some point.
The Alone Again solo and acoustic moniker makes me wonder, it seems like a full circle moment because you're alone again and it's not solo, it's alone. So there's a connotation to that too. Can you comment on that?
Well, I mean, it's just one of those things. And me being, unfortunately quotable and a little too cute as usual. I didn't. I just woke up one morning without a band, and my band quit by email. After Hardly Strictly Bluegrass the year before last. So, and they all had different reasons they gave why, but nobody gave me any sort of reason or anything, or had any discussion about that. I got a group email, and that's not. It may be that may be you know that may be a younger generation thing, and they're all younger than me, um, but that's not how that's done where I come from, and at my age. So it hurt, and it was. But then I thought, well, maybe this is a crossroads, and because I mean, it's obvious I make more money if I tour by myself, and I've got to believe that people come to hear the songs, rather than whoever the sidemen are. And if I don't believe that, then I really shouldn't be doing this. And I started in coffee houses. I never had a band until I was 27, 28 years old. So I know how to do this. And I've always done it. I've always kept my hand in it. I've done solo tours from the beginning after Guitar Town came out. I made a point of going out solo in between every album cycle to kind of keep that, that skill set alive. Because, and it's not just, it's the playing and singing part of it, but it's also the connecting with an audience part of it. And I know how to do it. I had good teachers, and I was taught, the original teachers were like Townes Van Zandt, Guy Clark, and Jerry Jeff Walker, and and those lessons occurred in coffee houses. So it's not, I know it is a trip back to that, and and it's sort of I'm single too, and I have been for a long time now, and I think I'm probably going to stay that way. I think I finally got it. So
I can kind of understand how you feel about the band because talking with other band leaders, it becomes pretty clear about how important their players are. I remember talking with Kev Russell of the band Shiny Ribs last year, and he has his backup singers, and one of them left like mid-tour, and he was pretty much reeling from that at the onset of our interview. That was top of mind for him. So I kind of got to glimpse into how that dynamic works with band leaders.
well, you know what? In the first place, there's been a Duke since 1982, which was a three-piece rockabilly band originally. And the last continuity died with Kelly Looney, who was my bass player from 1988 until he passed away in 2019. So there was no connective tissue between this version of the Dukes and anything historical. And I tried to my best to take care of everybody. I went out and got the loans during the lockdown, and got money to them then. Everybody got a Christmas bonus every year, and I did the best I could. But I am, there are people that have over the years, both crew people and band people, that were offered more money than I can pay at my level, and they've left, and I'm okay with that. I understand. I don't understand getting an email, but that's my only issue with it. But have I ever thought anybody was indispensable in one of my bands? Nah, not once. It's about the songs, and if you want to be indispensable, write your own songs. It's that simple.
A sing-along if there ever was one, and a prime example of how to be indispensable, as he put it, his song I Ain't Ever Satisfied, originally on Steve Earle and the Dukes' 1987 album Exit Zero. I asked Steve about his relationship with that era of his songwriting and how it feels to play that song now versus when he first wrote it.
Everybody sings along on that song, so I like that. I mean, there's still some of me in all of those songs I wrote when I was younger, but there's basically 4 records that I wrote before I got sober, So, and then there's everything after that, which is like, I think it totals 21 studio albums. And I haven't quit writing songs. I've just, the last record of original material was in 2020, but I've been working on a musical since then. That's where the writing's been going, which is a lot of energy. And it's a lot harder just because you're writing specific things for specific places in the piece. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And I'm writing a musical, Tender Mercies, with Daisy Foote, whose father, Horton Foote, wrote the original screenplay. And it's turning out great. We're really proud of it so far, but it's really hard work. And but Goodbye was the first song that I ever wrote sober. And that's also on this record. And I wrote it during my 1 hour that I got a guitar in a treatment center. I was furloughed out of jail into a treatment center, and they wouldn't let me have the guitar at first. And when they finally let me have it, I wrote that song after not writing anything for 4 years. So the relationships are now, they're different. Sometimes it doesn't feel like me, but I know it was me. And there are nights when I'm up there singing them and I find myself in that place. And sometimes that is uncomfortable. If those things don't occur, then you're mailing it in. I try to stay in the songs when I'm performing them. When you do this for a long time, you can catch yourself like trying to figure out, thinking about what you're going to eat the next day, or baseball, and I'm bad about having scores fed to me off the side of the stage during the playoffs. But, I try to stay in the song because acting a little bit, I don't think I'm an actor because David Simon decided to put me in a TV show, but I've done some of it now and been around theater a lot, because I've done music for 2 plays in New York now, 2 off-Broadway plays to lead up to where I am now. And it's what I moved to New York to do. So that's 20 years of working around that. And the acting part of it has made me a better performer on stage singing these songs. I can inhabit a song, even though I'm clean. I can inhabit a song I wrote before I was clean, way better, more, I think, more effectively and more believably than I could when I was loaded. So I really didn't go on stage loaded very often. I tried to wait until after the show till the very end. And then suddenly I eventually reached a point where I had to do something or I would be sick. And, that's when the wheels came off. That's when the wheels always come off.
I wonder if you have any favorite covers of your songs. A ton of artists have covered your songs, and there's also just the songs that you've written for other artists.
It's mostly covers. It's mostly people that have covered songs. I haven't really written much of anything specifically for anybody except Joan Baez. I wrote 4 songs because she asked me to. I was producing the record and I said, well, here's these songs. She goes, I'm not listening to any more songs. I said, Joan, you've only given me 7 songs. That's not for record. She goes, you're going to write the rest of it. So I wrote God is God for Joan. I wrote, it's like, I wrote like 4 songs for that album. And I don't, my favorite cover probably is Emmy's version of Goodbye. That's pretty easy. She covered, but that's just a musical call. Also an Emmy is sort of a tie between Sean Colvin and Emmy because they both recorded songs of mine when I was in trouble, when I was on the street. And they were these tiny glimmers of light at the end of the tunnel. And it took me a while after that to come back, but I think they had something to do with it, me thinking that, that maybe that was worth doing. Was Sean recorded Someday on the CoverGirl record, and Emmy recorded Guitar Town. It opens the Nash Ramblers at the Ryman Auditorium.
Can't remember if we said goodbye. But I recall all the nights down in Mexico. One place I'll never go in my life again. Was I just also, or maybe just too high? But I can't remember if we said goodbye. No, I can't remember if we said goodbye. Goodbye.
An excerpt of Emmylou Harris's version of Steve Earle's song Goodbye from her 1995 album Wrecking Ball, here on Southern Songs and Stories. Coming up, Steve muses about what's on his bucket list after this question about the songs that he's covered, which are his favorites.
I've done the best ones I've done. My favorite probably of all the covers I've done, and some of them are really obscure. I'm really proud of my cover of My Back Pages, which is actually a track that I produced. I recorded the track for Jackson Browne and Joan Osborne to do as a duet. And I did it without them present, and got them to agree on the key, and I cut the track. So I sang the guide vocal, and it was too high for me. It sounded like my head was about to blow off, but I became sort of enamored of the vocal. So a couple of years later, when we put together a record called Sidetracks, we released that. And so that I love that cover. I've just covered, the Petty cover that's out, the record that's out right now. I'm pretty proud of the whole Guy and Jerry Jeff records. I'm proud of all that stuff. But I just recorded, and you're not going to see it for a little while, with Lucinda's band. I recorded. Neil Young is putting together a tribute record. It's going to benefit the Bridge School, and so I did Long May You Run, and which I've always loved that song. I'm a big fan of that Stills Young Band record anyway, and I'm pretty proud of this cover of Long May You Run that you'll probably see sometime within the next year.
Unthought of this somehow, but I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now. A self-ordained professor's tongue, too serious to fool, spouting out that liberty is just equality in school. Equality, I spoke the word as if a wedding vow. But I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now. In a soldier's stance, I aim my hand at the mongrel dogs who teach. That I'd become my enemy in the instant that I preach. My pathway led by confusion boats, mutiny from stern to bow. But I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now. Yes, my God stood hard when abstract threats too noble to neglect deceived me into thinking I had something to protect. Good and bad, I define these terms quite clear, no doubt somehow. But I was so much older then, I'm younger than that now.
A Bob Dylan song that Dylan refused to play live for decades after writing it, finally debuting his own live rendition in 1988. That's a bit of My Back Pages from Steve Earle, which rounds out his 2002 collection Sidetracks. As a Nashville Hall of Fame songwriter and 3-time Grammy Award winner, Steve Earle's career would be the envy of most any music artist. But add to that his work as a music producer, as well as a novelist, short story writer, and even an actor. I wondered what, if anything, there is left that he wants to accomplish.
Most of the stuff I want to accomplish has more to do with fishing than it does music. When it gets right down to it, I caught my first tarpon the other day. I want to catch a permit now, but that's a whole nother disease. Musically, I don't know. I played Carnegie Hall. I've done my own gig at Carnegie Hall. Might be cool, but I don't think that'll ever happen. I played Carnegie Hall on concerts that featured a lot of people, these things that these tribute concerts that Michael Dorf does there. I've done several of those. I did the Bruce Springsteen one. We did one for Shane and Sinead recently. I did the Crosby, Stills and Nash one. So I played Carnegie Hall 5 or 6 times, stuff like that. I don't know. I want to make a record of Irish music with the players that I know there. And I've talked to Donald Lundy about that. He's going through some health things right now, and he's determined to recover and us start on that. So we talked about that the other day. And I want to do that before I die. I actually somebody, just because of a friend of mine, Tom Littlefield, when I made the bluegrass record, he knew quite a bit about it because his mother was one of the founders of the Station Inn in Nashville. And he's kind of a smart ass anyway, and he's a dear friend of mine, but when he said his grandfather was Woody Herman, was Woody Herman. So he basically, when I made the bluegrass record, goes, no, I said, and it did take a lot of, cojones to make that record. I watched bluegrass. It was my favorite kind of music for a long time before I got up the nerve to do it. And I made it with the best bluegrass band in the world. So I was punching way above my weight. And he said, you did that. You pulled it off. I'm proud of you. Just don't ever try to make a jazz record. And that's been gnawing at me and my idea of jazz is pretty archaic, but it's also pretty deep. I mean, my favorite jazz records is probably Birth of the Cool. And, I like pretty hard bop and I just, I kind of, but I don't know. I know some guys. I mean, I know Brian Blade and I could start right there. He's Max Roach nowadays. I could probably ask him and put something together, but and an idea of jazz songs, of writing songs that sort of deserve that sort of treatment. It would be definitely something more melodic than a lot of modern jazz is. It'd be archaic to some degree, but I think I've learned I can do a lot with my voice if I sing softer. That was my sort of Chet Baker moment that happened after I got clean, and it's when it changed a lot of the way that I perform, because in the 80s everything I did was just full blast all the time, and I learned how to sing soft, and so there's some, I might do that if I live long enough.
Well, we'd love to hear it. Wonder if you have a comment, Steve, about how place is often so central to so many kinds of roots music and in style and in the lyrics. I wonder if you have any observations about how Texas or how any other places in the South especially might have shaped your music.
I mean, I'm about the Beatles as much as I am, or more than anything else, because I was an Elvis fan as a small kid and we saw all those movies. And then the Beatles happened when I'm 8. And my uncle, who was 5 years older, said, don't miss the Ed Sullivan Show tonight. And I watched it, and that changed everything. That was when I decided that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I wanted to be. And I started trying to learn to play guitar, but I didn't have one for a while. And my dad had a ukulele, and I messed around with that. I played the mean tennis racket when I was, singing with records. But it just became everything. But I also lived in an area where, number one, AM radio in those days in Texas, you heard Buck Owens right after the Beatles sometimes. I mean, he crossed over from Tiger by the Tail, was on the radio the same time as I can remember very vividly hearing Tiger by the Tail and I Feel Fine, one right after the other on the radio, on a local radio station in San Antonio. So, Doug Somm was our local, rock and roll hero. And I knew him from the time I was 14. I met Townes Van Zandt when I was 17. George Chambers, who had the best local country band in San Antonio, and Willie used to use his band all the time before he moved back to Texas when he came through, was my my science teacher in high school. But he was the only teacher in my high school that drove a Mercedes convertible, because he made a lot of money on the weekends. And I had 2 uncles, one who had rock and roll bands and one who was my dad's older brother, who was the best 9-fingered piano player in Northeast Texas. And, New Moon Mulligan was, he was a great Western swing piano player. And so there was just a lot of great country music. The level of musicianship in country bands in South Texas was incredible, because it was all Western swing based, and there was more of a direct linked to rock and roll than what was going on in Nashville at the time, because the first rock and roll bands were like Chuck Berry, fresh out of the Air Force, and you can tell, listen to Maybelline. He had been listening to something, and Maybelline's Ida Red. It's basically a remake of a Bob Wills song. Or Elvis's band, who were both of those guys, both Scotty and Bill, were in I think they were called the Starlight Ramblers or something like, or Wranglers or something like that. They were in a Western swing band. Bill Haley and the Comets were a Western swing band. So, I just grew up in a place where, and then I was too young to get in the bars, so there were coffee houses, and it was the 60s and the Vietnam War was going on. And all those things sort of combined to make me, and I'm grateful for that, because it's a pretty rich period of time and place that I grew up in. Then I saw very little bluegrass. I saw Bill Monroe and the Opry when I was 7. But my mother was born in Tennessee. She was born in Nashville, and she moved to Texas in high school. So we would visit her grandmother, who had raised her from a couple of times. I went when I was 7. I went when I was 12, and went to the Opry both times. I saw Bill Monroe that time. That was the first bluegrass I remember seeing, except on television. And there was a lot of country music programs, and Bill Monroe was still on them then. But then I moved to Nashville in 74, and I started filling in those gaps quickly, because the other weirdos besides Guy Clark and Steve Young and the other long hairs that I hung out with were the long hair bluegrass musicians, because Hartford was already there by that time, and he was the center of that scene. And John Hartford, his impact on all the music that everybody that I know made, you can't, there's no way to downplay it. It's just like he was a very, very big deal. Guy was the center of one circle of people, and John was the center of another, and they were interlinked. You can hear it in Guy's music. He was being exposed to bluegrass for the first time, and it all comes from Irish and Scottish music. And I got to go across the pond, but when I finally started making records, and I met the Pogues and backtracked from that, and met some very, very serious Irish traditional musicians, and that's the journey. That's what I'm a folkie. I came out of coffee houses. I'm a musicologist at heart. I always want to know where things came from.
Closing out our episode on Steve Earle with a live acoustic version of his best-known song, which, as you heard him tell the audience, is now the state song of Tennessee. Thank you so much for listening. We're grateful that you took the time to join us, and hope you can help us spread awareness of what we're doing. It's as easy as telling a friend and following this podcast on your platform of choice. From there, it takes just a moment to give us a top rating and a review. It makes a great difference, because the more top reviews and ratings we get, the more visible we become to everyone on those platforms, which means that more people just like you find musical kinship with artists like Steve Earle. I would love to hear your comments about this episode or any of our over 150 episodes on Southern Songs and Stories. Our email is southernsongsandstories@gmail.com. I'll be glad to reply. Check out the show notes at southernsongsandstories.com. And you can also follow me on Substack, where I post transcripts of entire episodes along with updates on the series. Plus, we have an Instagram @SouthStories and are on Facebook as simply Southern Songs and Stories. This series is a part of the lineup of both Public Radio WNCW and Osiris Media, with all the Osiris shows available at osirispod.com. You can also hear new episodes on Bluegrass Planet Radio at bluegrassplanetradio.com. Thanks to Jacqueline Anthony for producing the radio adaptations of this series on Public Radio WNCW, where we worked with Joshua Ming, who wrote and performed our theme songs. I'm your host and producer, Joe Kendrick, and this is Southern Songs and Stories, the music of the South and the artists who make it.
outskirts around here. I know why he